This video is to show you how to make a bar graph in CODAP. So when we get into CODAP, the first thing we have to do is have a data set. I've got one open that I created from another website called Census at School, and it's comprised of a random sample of 250 North Carolina high school student responses from the year 2023. We'll talk more about Census at School in class in a later lesson. Once I've got my data set open, to make a bar graph, remember that I have to be using categorical variables. But first, I'm going to go ahead and click Graph. And it's going to open a generic graph that has a dot for all of the cases that are in my data set. In this case, 250 cases. That was my sample size from Census at School. Now what I need to do is pick a categorical variable. And remember, those are ones that have responses that are labels, like hair color, car color, cell phone provider, things like that. Or it has responses comprised of numbers, but if I were to take the average of those numbers, it really wouldn't be useful. So we're going to find a categorical variable here in my data set, and I think I am going to use favorite physical activity. So this is one of the questions in the Census at School questionnaire, is your favorite physical activity. And so in CODAP, all I do is I left click on the label, and I drag that attribute to my graph. And since it's a categorical label, it doesn't quite make a dot or a bar graph yet. It makes a dot plot. Okay, it makes kind of like a categorical dot plot. The way I'm going to turn these into a graph is I'm going to click on this configure tool here. Okay, it's called the configuration tool. And there's only one option because it's a categorical variable, and that's to fuse my dots into bars. So I'm going to check that box, and it turns it into a bar graph for me. Okay, it turns this thing into a bar graph for me. Now, the other thing I would like to do is you should always give a bar graph or any graph a title. So you click on where it says cases at the top, and you can do type in a title. Like I'm going to type in favorite physical activity of North Carolina of 2023 North Carolina high school students. And then you might want to put in what your sample size was. So here it would be n equals 250. All right. Now, I can stretch that out because it looks like my title's not showing completely. There we go. And what it's going to default to is giving you the count. And what this is telling you how many are in each bar. Okay, it's how many are in each bar. So if you notice when I move over a bar, it gives me information about that bar. So like here for basketball, it tells me 18 of the 243 respondents, or 7.4%, said basketball is their favorite activity. All right, so the count here is 18, the percentage is 7.4%. Now remember, I put that my sample size was 250 students. I'm going to go back and edit that because notice it says it's 18 of 243. The reason this is not 250 is because 7 students in this did not answer this question. And we can see one right here. This student here in the questionnaire started to answer the questions. They got as far as putting in where they're from, the data year, their class level, and they put in their gender. But it looks like after that, they didn't answer any of the other questions. So that's the reason that we only have 243 cases in our data. So I'm going to come back up here. I'm going to change my title. So I just click on it again. So instead of 250, I'm going to tell you that it's out of 243 cases. Now, I may want those numbers on my actual graph. So what I'm going to do is I'll click on the measure tool and I'll click on count. And what it'll do is across the top, it'll put in what I have. Maybe I don't want the counts, but maybe I want to show the actual percentages. Now, these are really small in this graph, but it does label the percentages up there. Another thing we can do is if we click on the display, notice how it has count. I've fused the dots and it adds the scale here. So count is by default. I could always switch this to percentages. So now it tells me what percentage is there. All right. And so it's scaled it a little bit differently. Because it's always going to show me the biggest bar. So here it's 12.8% of people said other. And across the bottom, your categories are in alphabetical order, but you can always take and move them. Okay, so if you wanted to put tennis, I don't know, for some reason on the left, you could do that. All right. So you can reorder those, and that's how you make a bar graph.